To even mention the UFO phenomenon is taboo for some. In the past, to even address this subject, you were put in the tinfoil hat category. But that is all changing, not just in pulp culture, but also in government. Genesis, or Bereshith in Hebrew, which means in the beginning, gives us much detail about the creation of our universe and man, but it doesn't give us the full story. You must turn to the New Testament to fill in the gaps as it relates to the spirit realm and the supernatural. Genesis gives us this beautiful story of creation and how a perfect world became flawed. But as we read through the Bible, we see not only the rebellion of man, but also the rebellion of angels. And we see that in the New Testament. Revelation 12, 7-9. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Yeshua says in Luke 10:18 that he saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Today's message is meant to be a shift in thought and perception, not just in our view of the supernatural, but in the perception of what we have been programmed to believe from worldly sources. I've watched numerous shows on television about this subject. I've seen numerous reporters talk about this subject. Instantly, they jump to aliens from another planet, when we know UFO simply means unidentified flying object. I believe this alien deception will have people worshiping Satan and his fallen angels before the return of the Messiah. We already have scientists who believe that we have been seeded here by extraterrestrials. I have heard scientists make comments like, we hope we can make contact with advanced beings. They're looking for life right now. And they can solve our problems of clean energy, climate change, and war. You hear this all the time. This is the big problem we have. My question is, will the man of sin use this? Yahshua warns of great deception in Matthew 24:24. For there shall arise false messiahs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. One has to ask, what are these great signs and wonders? In the book of Luke, Yeshua gives us a glimpse into the time before he returns. In chapter 21:25, there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. People will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then in verse 27, he tells us, after these things, we will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Then Yeshua tells them this interesting parable about the fig tree. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they sprout leaves, you can see yourselves and know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that the kingdom of Elohim is near. I believe we are seeing that fig tree start to sprout. And this fig tree is a deception from Satan by way of the media, movies, and even our own government. The veil of truth will be so unbelievable that the faith of believers everywhere will be put to the test. The current description of these objects has now changed, by the way, from UFO, because I guess of the negative connotation, to UAP, or unidentified aerial phenomenon. Government acknowledging the existence of UFOs has never happened in the history of this country. We must ask the question, why? Why now? What we are seeing is something that transcends the laws of physics that we know it, and that as we as human beings are confined to, that Yahweh has given us and bound us by. We're also dealing with objects that appear to move interdimensionally. Here is a booklet by Dr. John Ankerberg. He compiled various studies by those who claim to be abducted by aliens from around the world. The similarities he found between UFO encounters and the occult was shocking. Ankerberg goes as far as to say that all abductees that he has researched had been exposed to the occult in one way or another. Dr. Ankerberg points out similarities like poltergeist events, the ever-present experience of supposedly missing time, mental terrorism, profound and drastic personality changes, social notoriety and or stigma, dramatic continuing after effects and contacts with the entities, an initial intuitive sense of tremendous fear and frequent evil, and numerous correlations to ancient paganism which haunt their relationship. In this book, Ankerberg documents best-selling author Whitley Strieberg and his claims of UFO experiences. Strieberg has a strong background in the occult, and many of his best-selling books deal with the occult. His 2 UFO books have also been bestsellers: Communion, which was on the New York Times bestseller list for 8 months, and its sequel, Transformation. Strieberg has close encounters with what he believes are alien beings. Strieberg says, "I became entirely given over to extreme dread. The fear was so powerful that it seemed to make my personality completely evaporate. Whitley, which is his first name, ceased to exist. What was left was a body and a state of raw fear so great that it swept about me like a thick, suffocating curtain, turning paralysis into a condition that seemed close to death. I died and a wild animal appeared in my place. I had been captured like a wild animal on December 26, right after Christmas, I might add, and rendered helpless. They had changed me, done something to me. I could sense it clearly that night, but I could not articulate it. I wondered if there was any relationship between my experience and the mystic walk of the shaman or the night ride of the witch." You got to think this guy is into the occult. "I was doubly worried now for my sanity. The visitors persisted in my mind like glowing coals. Whatever this was, it had been involved with me for many years. I really squirmed. I had an awful feeling. I felt their presence. It was palpable. Most upsetting, I could smell them." He describes one of the aliens as what seemed almost to be a demon with a narrow face and dark slanted eyes. It spoke to me in a high, squeaky voice. In Transformation, the sequel to Communion, Strieberg continues to wonder about both the nature and the motives of the UFO entities. Why were my visitors so secretive, hiding themselves behind my consciousness? I could only conclude that they were using me and did not want me to know why. What if they were dangerous? Then I was terribly dangerous because I was playing a role in acclimatizing people to them. Eventually, he realizes he was embroiled in a battle that might claim much more than his physical existence. Quote, "Increasingly, I felt as if I were entering a struggle that might even be more than life or death. It might be a struggle for my very soul, my essence, or whatever part of me might have reference to the eternal. There are worse things than death, I suspected. So far, the word demon had never been spoken among the scientists and doctors who are working with me. Alone at night, I worried about the legendary cunning of demons. At the very least, I was going stark raving mad." Strieberg became tormented. Quote, "I could not dispel my fear. I had already determined that not one human soul knows a single certain thing about the visitors. Nobody. He also realized that the entities could not be trusted. I couldn't get any reassurance from the visitors. I couldn't get even a breath of a promise, let alone a guarantee that they wouldn't hurt me." Ankerberg makes this comment, "But hurt him they did, time and time again, brutally and sadistically. Is it surprising that he recalls other sensings of the demonic? Quote, I wondered if I might not be in the grip of demons, if they were not making me suffer for their own purposes or simply for their enjoyment. I felt an absolutely indescribable sense of menace. It was hell on earth to be there in the presence of the entities, and yet I couldn't move, I couldn't cry out, I couldn't get away. I lay as still as death, suffering inner agonies. Whatever was there seemed so monstrously ugly, so filthy and dark and sinister. Of course they were demons, they had to be. And they were here, and I couldn't get away." Strieberg's account should send shockwaves to all of us as it relates to UFOs and what they really are, which are fallen demonic angels. The Apostle Paul gives us some insight on these fallen angels in Ephesians 6:12. You want to turn there with me? Paul says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." The interlinear has a more detailed, direct translation in the Greek, and I just took this right over the translation from the Greek. "We wrestle against the cosmic powers of the darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." The realms that Paul is speaking here are dimensions. It is, in Greek, it's called eperonios, and has the meaning of a celestial sphere, or a sphere of spiritual activities, Strong's describes.